People have long debated whether or not video games are a positive or negative influence on their consumers, specifically on children and adolescents. Some of the harshest critics of gaming over the years have cited the extreme outliers of gamers who spend all day every day in their room, not learning any real skills or going outside or making any real friends for that matter. Other critics yet have cited violence in video games and are afraid that that might transfer into the real world. However, despite all of the naysayers, I think by now we have some pretty good examples that video games can also have a positive influence as well. And today, that's exactly what I want to discuss. Specifically, I'm going to be discussing my own personal experience with video games and how they improved my life. I'm going to be going over some of my favorite games of all time and showing you in chronological order the games that helped me and what they did for me. Now, of course, it would be crazy for me to sit here and say that video games were the only things that taught me any life lessons. Of course, probably the majority of things I learned in life were through real-world experiences, or from other people like my parents, family, friends, and teachers, or maybe even through TV shows and music. But the purpose of this video is to show you that without a shadow of a doubt, video games have had a positive influence on my life and probably millions of other people's lives as well. This is how video games positively impacted my life. Part 1. Sega Genesis games. Now, most of these categories I'm going to be discussing throughout this video are actually specific games. However, this very first category, I'm lumping all Sega Genesis games together. And the reason for that is because I got this console when I was like 2 or 3 years old, and I played it to around the age of 6 or 7. Some of my earliest childhood memories are playing on this system with my dad. Co-op games like Batman and Robin, or even Spider-Man, or all sorts of other different games. While I may have been a little bit too young to really fully absorb some of the lessons that were being imparted in some of these games, the one lesson that I definitely did take away from this was that playing together like this was a great way to bond, and that I enjoyed working together with other people towards common goals. I also would have the Sega Genesis at my grandmother's house as well, and I would play some of these games with my cousins, and it was a great way for us to bond as well. Part 2. Pokemon Red. Now, I received my first Game Boy Color when I was 3 years old, and on my 4th birthday I was given Pokemon Red as my birthday gift, and boy was I happy. But I really quickly learned that this game was going to be challenging, especially for my 4-year-old little brain. I didn't understand the concept of save states, I didn't really understand any of the words I was reading in the menu, and I didn't know where I was supposed to go. However, after much trial and error, I slowly but surely made my way through the beginning levels, and in doing so, I was learning how to read. While my parents were simultaneously teaching me how to read outside of the game, and I was probably in preschool learning my ABCs, this game gave me a jump up on everybody else, to be honest with you. The vocabulary was probably in the 5th or 6th grade range level, and I was 4 years old. And to be honest with you, at first I didn't understand 95% of the words I was seeing on the screen. But I firmly believe that this game gave me an edge in helping me learn how to read faster. In addition to that, this game forced me to become a problem solver, and it forced me to become diligent and give me a sense of perseverance. I was really obsessed with the game, but I knew that I couldn't go further unless I did whatever I had to do to figure out how to go further. And that, I believe, unlocks a section of your brain that some people never use in their whole lives. And because of video games like Pokemon Red, I was doing things like that at the age of 4. Part 3. Pokemon Crystal. Now, while this is one of my favorite video games of all time, to be honest with you, the real lesson that I learned from this game didn't actually even come from the game itself. It came from outside the game. Let me explain. You see, I was around the age of 7 or 8 years old when I really found out about this game and decided I really wanted it. But my dad wanted to instill a lesson in me, so he told me that I should have to earn it. Now, at the time, I believe the game was around $20 or $25 or something like that. So basically what we did was, my dad gave me a bunch of little opportunities to make money around the house. And this is actually how he kind of introduced certain chores to me. But it was a really good lesson for me, and in addition to that, Like, me and my dad walked around the neighborhood selling lemonade. He would pay me $1 or 50 cents here and there to try different foods I had never tried before. There was even, I would even look for change in between the couch and all sorts of different things to try to find money. Once I finally reached that $25 or $20 threshold, whatever it was, I was absolutely ecstatic. This was the first thing that I had ever really truly earned in my life, at least with money anyway. So not only will I always remember this game for how amazing it was, but I'll always remember this game for the lesson I learned outside the game from my dad about how to earn things for yourself. Part 4. Jet Set Radio Future! Now, Jet Set Radio Future is probably one of the most underrated video games of all time. This game came with the original Xbox for those of us who were lucky enough to get it when it first came out. I started playing this game around the age of 7, I believe, and it was extremely eye-opening for me. From the art style, to the music, to the creative characters, and everything in between, it was really something to behold. This game showed me a whole new style of music, but more importantly, it showed me self-expression. It showed me that sometimes following the rules isn't the right thing to do. And just like Pokemon Red, this game was big in helping me learn vocabulary words that were way past my scope. At the age of 7, I was reading and using words in class that were probably high school words because I learned them from this game. But all in all, the rebellious spirit of this game really stuck with me throughout my life. It makes you realize that sometimes the guys who you think are the good guys are really the bad guys. Sometimes the bad guys are really the good guys. And sometimes, even when things are hard, you still gotta have fun. Part 5. Golden Sun. These games were surprisingly difficult, especially the second game. There were a lot of areas you had to explore, way more than you would think there would be, and there was really no hand-holding at all. You had to find everything. You had to explore every cave and every area on the entire planet to find where you were supposed to go. As a kid, this took forever. But it also built up my will. I didn't want to give up on these games because I liked them so much. If you remember, I said something similar about Pokemon Red. So I just kept trying, and this was before the time of online forums. Or at least it was before the time that I had access to online forums. See, I was still about 8 or 9 years old playing these games. And this was back when most people had dial-up internet, or people were really just starting to get good internet a couple of years after this. So, unless you had the strategy guides, which I didn't until later on, you really had no chance unless you just figured it out yourself. There were a lot of difficult puzzles and a lot of difficult fights in these games. But these games taught me to solve problems and solve puzzles, and I really think that they helped my brain work in a special way. This was also around the age where I started getting into writing fiction as a hobby. This game was one of my first introductions to the fantasy genre and gave me a lot of great ideas for things that I wanted to write about. In addition to the writing, the puzzle solving, and the problem solving in general, and the general essence of perseverance this game gave me, this game also added to my music taste just as Jet Set Radio Future did. I'm not sure exactly how to describe the music in this game, but it's very fast-paced, very virtuosic, and although this word has been overused a lot in recent years, it was very epic. You could see how somebody could play these games as a kid and grow up to like classical music or metal music. Part 6. Backyard Football and Backyard Baseball. Now, I was playing these games around the age of 8 or 9 years old, and they really sparked my interest in not only watching sports, but playing sports. These games taught me some of the most prominent player names, as well as it gave me an idea of how good they probably were. Now, these weren't the only sports games I played. I had a game called MLB Inside Pitch on the Xbox, as well as a game called NFL Fever on the Xbox. But the backyard games were a little bit different in that since they were on the Game Boy, I was able to link up with my friends and play against them one-on-one. Not just at home, but pretty much anywhere, as long as we both had a Game Boy and a Link. It just so happened that I started playing sports and started taking them more seriously as I was playing these games, and I think these games had a pretty positive impact on my life in that regard. Not only do these games incite you to want to play sports or watch sports, but they kind of help you learn the rules a little bit as well. Now, in some of these games, the rules are slightly different, like especially maybe in backyard football with some of the rules, but for the most part, they're pretty much identical. And that was really informative. Overall, these kinds of games encouraged kids to get out and play the real thing in the real world. My friends and I would often play touch football, wiffle ball, or baseball whenever we couldn't play this game. We played outside pretty much every single day. Games like this only helped encourage that. Part 7. Fire Emblem. Now, Fire Emblem was perhaps the first strategy game that I ever played, and it really made me use my brain in a way that I never had before. These games are admittedly pretty frustrating. If a character dies in any point in the story, they're dead forever, which leaves you to have to decide whether you want to restart an entire level or just go on without them and hope that you don't need them in the future of the game. This do or die mechanic of the game forced me to really meticulously think out my steps, like a giant game of chess. Not to mention, after retrying the same levels over and over and over again, it definitely added to my persistence level for sure. Like Golden Sun, Fire Emblem was one of the first fantasy games that I had ever played, and it had a massive impact on my now developing hobby of writing, as well as my vocabulary, and just the stories that I would enjoy in the future. I even remember being a kid and thinking I wanted to be like a general in the army or something like that after playing these games. But overall, the music, the writing, the stories, the characters, the tactics, and the perseverance required to defeat these games definitely left a positive impact on me. Part 8. Halo. Now, the Halo franchise is widely regarded as one of the greatest gaming franchises of all times, but I'm not here just to talk about games for the sake of being good. I'm here to talk about games for the sake of the positive impact they have on people. So I was about 11 years old when I received this game for Christmas, and as most of you know, this game is rated M for mature. So on the surface, you might think, you were too young to be playing that game. And who knows, maybe I was. This was probably the first violent game I ever played, or at least truly violent game that I ever played. However, I think that there were a lot of positive things that I took from this game as well. Halo introduced me to the world of science fiction. Halo also introduced me to the concept of dark humor in a lot of ways. If you listen to some of the Marines talking or some of the grunts, they would always be saying funny things, even in dire situations. For a kid with zero knowledge on the subject, I also think these games gave me a sense of understanding about military tactics. I know looking back as an adult now that might sound laughable, but for a kid who doesn't know anything about anything, it was really my first experience with the concept. Overall, though, I think the best thing I took away from this game was being able to work together with my brother to fight common enemies. We would have to sit and strategize and decide how we were going to take on different enemies throughout each level. Sometimes it wasn't easy and straightforward, especially if you were playing on heroic or legendary difficulties. So we had to think about exactly how we were going to go about it. And like Fire Emblem, this forced us to strategize and make our way through the levels, which I believe had a constructive and positive impact on our development. Part 9. Runescape. Now, I learned so much from this game that I'm not even really sure where to start, but perhaps the best place to start is the hard skill of typing. You had to learn how to type fast in this game, especially before the Grand Exchange existed. If you wanted to sell your goods, the only way to do it was by typing the same message over and over again and making sure that people could see it. Because of this, to this day, I'm still probably the fastest typer in any job I've ever had. I was always like the fastest typer in any computer class I ever had, too. But really, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to things you learn from this game. If you're a gamer coming from basically any other game ever made to RuneScape, you're going to realize something really fast. The grind in this game is unparalleled. It takes a certain type of person, possibly masochistic a little bit, in order to really want to excel at this game. It takes more time to level up and get max levels to finish all the quests, etc., than probably any other game ever made. There are a lot of challenges in this game that have never been completed by any players ever. In addition to persistence, though, this game taught me how to interact with other people, but specifically how to be skeptical of them. There were a lot of people that tried to scam you in this game. They would promise you things like free trimmed armor, or I'll upgrade your weapon. And to somebody who didn't know that much about the game, or might be too trusting, you would trade them your item. I remember one time I had saved up a long time to get my first rune scimitar. I traded it to a scammer and he logged out. I knew from that day forward I could never fully trust anyone on that game again. And I think that also carried over into real life too. You see, when things come down to money, you have to be skeptical of people, and this game taught me that. But when it comes to money, it's not just about being skeptical, it's also learning how to haggle. Learning that the prices of things go up and down, and understanding the very basic principles of economics, which this game did. Now, I can't speak for other people, but I can say that this game actually kind of encouraged me to start lifting weights. And I know what you're thinking. What are you talking about? How does RuneScape have anything to do with lifting weights? Well, let me explain. You see, I was doing some AFK strength training, and it was taking forever, of course, just like any other skill leveling up in this game. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to spend all this time training my strength in a game, then maybe I should train my strength in real life. So what I started doing was I would have crabs being killed AFK on my phone while I would be lifting weights at the same time. And I don't know that I would have necessarily thought to do that if it wasn't for the kick in the pants that this game gave me. The final point I'll make, though, which is sort of similar to one of the first points I made in the beginning of this section, is that this game is harder in terms of leveling up and grinding than pretty much any other game. By comparison, pretty much everything else is going to seem easier. And it's not just other video games, but it's things in real life, too. If you're used to spending 4 hours doing something difficult in a game, 30 minutes of homework doesn't really seem that bad by comparison. Part 10, Call of Duty. So while there were certain things I learned from this game's campaign, like weapon names and different types of terminologies that soldiers would use to refer to each other, I think I'm going to mainly touch on the multiplayer of these games. Now, I was around 12 years old when the first Modern Warfare came out, and that Modern Warfare, World at War, Modern Warfare 2, and Black Ops 1 run was impeccable. We all probably said a lot of things we shouldn't have said in the multiplayer game chats in these games, but these games really helped me socialize with people outside of school and helped me make friends with people in school that I might not have otherwise hung out with. I honestly think games like this improved my reaction time as well, which could have transferred over into sports like baseball. I think you could make that argument. But yeah, I think overall this game's multiplayer allowed a whole generation of kids to tap into a level of socialization and humor that maybe they weren't otherwise getting. And it was really fun, to be honest with you. But not only was it fun, I believe it had a positive impact on all of our socializations. Part 11, Borderlands. In a world full of cookie-cutter style art, including video games, Borderlands was a really mind-opening experience. Borderlands taught us that graphics don't have to be perfect. In fact, sometimes, if they are, that can actually take away from the experience. And Borderlands also taught us that humor is paramount to a gaming experience. Borderlands was a really great lesson into the concept of juxtaposition, which is something that I'll be touching on even further in the next category. But not only were these games fun to play, they were a reminder that creativity is king. And in addition to that, I believe Borderlands was one of those games that reminds you to stop and smell the roses, so to speak, which is a lesson that you can take into your real life. You see, sometimes you're really caught up in grinding something, but sometimes you gotta just sit back and relax and appreciate something for what it is. And this game allowed me to do that. Part 12, Fallout. Now, I briefly mentioned during the Borderlands section that I would touch on the concept of juxtaposition. Well, what exactly is juxtaposition, and how does it relate to both of those games? According to this definition I found on Google via Merriam-Webster, juxtaposition is the act of placing two or more elements, ideas, characters, images, objects, etc., side by side to highlight their differences, similarities, or create a surprising contrast. In Borderlands, there's a massive juxtaposition between the non-serious vibe of the game and the humor mixed with the extreme violence. Fallout is pretty similar in that way. You can be listening to some of the most happy-go-lucky 30s music ever made while you're slicing somebody apart or blowing their brains out. It's a pretty crazy juxtaposition. And fully understanding the concept of juxtaposition is crucial to your media literacy. It's important for watching TV shows, reading books, watching movies, and understanding your favorite music as well. It's one of the elements that a lot of great artists use in their art. Not only did Fallout help me understand the concept of juxtaposition better, but it also showed me a lot of old music, which gave me a greater appreciation for some music that now is almost 100 years old. Part 13, Minecraft. Minecraft is the ultimate test of creativity. When it comes to this game, the sky really is the limit. The game encouraged me to try to be as creative as possible and build things out of my wildest imagination. But not only that, it was yet another great example of a game where I could play with friends and use it as an excuse to socialize and catch up with people, which definitely had a positive benefit to my life. There's nothing like going on a massive adventure with your friends, and if you can't do it in real life for some reason, then this might be the next best thing. Everyone using their imaginations and brains together to find out the best thing they want to build really is a great creative exercise, and I honestly think that this game had a positive impact on millions of people for that exact reason. Part 14, GTA 4. Now, I was not one of those people who got this game when it first came out. In fact, I didn't get it until several years later during the anticipation of GTA 5. I figured I would play this to get an idea of what I was in for. And boy, am I glad that I did. This game really showed me a lot of things that maybe I wasn't entirely aware of before. While I did go to a large and diverse high school, there were certain cultural elements to this game that were kind of eye-opening to me. And they made me realize that a lot of my classmates had probably played this game years prior, and I could see the influence in it in them. This game was notorious for its radio stations. It had a lot of great music, and it introduced me to hip-hop and punk rock culture, to name a few. In addition to that, the radio stations also featured a lot of humor. One such station was a parody of a conservative talk show where they would essentially use satire to make fun of conservative talking points. It was pretty funny, but it wasn't just conservatives they made fun of. These radio stations pretty much made fun of everything. I think this game had a really amazing sense of humor, and whoever was behind not only the radio stations but the humor in the game itself really had to be some of the funniest people out there. So in addition to learning about hip-hop culture, punk rock culture, and crime culture, you're also getting a masterclass in humor. And that's something you can take away from this game. Part 15, Red Dead Redemption. Now, Red Dead Redemption was perhaps one of the greatest games of all time, as was its successor, Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead had great graphics, great gameplay, basically great everything. But besides being a great game, it was also a great case study for people to see what it might have been like as an outlaw in the Wild Wild West. You see, it's one thing to be in an honors history class and read hundreds of pages of history, but it's another thing to play a simulation where you're actually being an outlaw in the West yourself. Now, of course, these games probably aren't 100% historically accurate, but these games did something that a lot of other games failed to do, which is to create a fun and vivid experience of a different past time period. So even though this is kind of like historical fiction, I think you could argue that this game was kind of educational. And the fact that it was really fun made it a draw as well, of course. Part 16, Skyrim. Now, Skyrim had everything you could possibly want out of a game. Adventure, strategy, great combat, and a bunch of other things like graphics and gameplay in general. That was just top tier. I believe this game came out when I was like 16 years old, so the puzzles and the idea of adventuring and problem solving and strategizing my moves at this point was nothing new to me in the world of video games. But I will say it did keep me sharp. While some people might have been drinking paint and looking at the wall or something like that, In my spare time, I was solving puzzles, I was strategizing, I was working on something, and I honestly think that kept my brain sharp. Not to mention, this game is amazing in terms of inspiring you, especially if you're a creative. I know I've mentioned this a couple of times now, but one of my hobbies is writing, and at the age of 16 or so, I was really getting even more into it. And this really inspired me a lot because it was probably one of the most immersive open world games that I had ever played in my life. Another thing that people rarely talk about with this game that was absolutely top tier about it was the music. I'm not really sure how to describe it. I don't know that you would necessarily call it classical. I suppose it was like choir music. But once again, it was something that broadened my musical tastes even further. The thing about creativity and making something interesting and unique is that when you experience something like that someone else made for yourself, it's going to wear off on you, and it's going to inspire you and influence you. It's going to expand your mind, and those are all positive things. And if there's any game that was ever able to do that for me, it was Skyrim. Part 17, Battle Royales. Now, when PUBG first came out, I wasn't able to play it because all I had was a little laptop used for taking notes in my college classes. It wasn't until shortly after I graduated college that I was really able to fully experience these games. One thing I can say about these games is that they require teamwork unlike perhaps any other game out there. So when you're playing your favorite Battle Royale, especially with your friends using a microphone, whether it's Fortnite or Warzone or whatever, it doesn't matter. You might think you're just hanging out and chilling, but you're also having a positive experience because you're working together on something. And you're not just working together on something like beating an AI. You're beating other real people. You're outlasting 99 or 96 other real people. That takes a lot of strategy and perseverance and dedication. You might even go so far as to say that in some of these games you can learn things about how you would try to survive if you were in a building that was being attacked. I know maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but still, the concept of camping and waiting and popping around corners and things like that, you like to think you'd never have to do things like that, but it could come in handy one day. But yeah, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but mainly, like I said, I think these games are excellent for socializing and for people to work together, especially a group of friends. And it's also a great way to make friends with people that you don't know. One of the fastest ways to make friends, in my opinion, is to have some sort of common activity that you're working on together. Drawing conclusions. So over the course of this video, I've explained to you in depth how some of my favorite games of all time have positively impacted my real life. But that shouldn't be the only takeaway you get from this video. I think it's safe to assume that if I had this kind of experience, millions of other people probably did too. And while yes, anything can be bad if it's abused or done too often, anyone can have their life derailed if they're playing video games 18 hours a day, all day, every day. However, for the most part, I think these things can have a positive impact on people's lives. So don't listen to the naysayers, because video games helped me grow in all sorts of areas of my life, such as my sense of humor, my determination and perseverance, my socialization, my teamwork, my problem-solving abilities, my reading and writing abilities, my cultural and pop cultural abilities, my artistic influence, my musical influence, learning how to save and invest money, strategizing, juxtaposition and the concept of it, not falling for scams, being skeptical, and historical lessons. If you made it all the way through to the end of the video, I just want to give you a big old thank you. I really appreciate you. This video probably took me longer to make than any other video I've ever made in my entire life. But I really appreciate if you guys would consider hitting the like button and subscribe button, because if you guys like this video and you like this kind of content, I'll keep making more. Guys, this is Emo Fisherman signing off. Peace, and thanks for watching.